Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt, the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, the book initiative that was begun when the pandemic struck, which it shuttered the doors of independent bookstores, it stopped authors' tours, including my own, and it kept people from, interacting with the authors they love. So today is really, really special. I know I say that all the time, but today is really special because today we have Elinor LIpman and her book, Miss Demeanor. So before I start to tell you about the book and about Ellie, I have to tell you a story that I was just talking about with Ellie before. I met Ellie back when AOL started, and I stalked her. I was looking for names of authors who I loved, and as soon as I saw Ellie, I thought, oh my God, I have to write to her on stupid AOL. So I wrote her a note, not expecting anything, and she wrote me the most charming, lovely, warm email. And it was also really, really funny because, of course, it's Elinor LIpman. And we gradually began writing more and more, and we became friends, and we've stayed friends forever. So I am so absolutely thrilled to have her here. I'm thrilled to have this book here, which I absolutely loved. I want to tell everybody out there, we at A Mighty Blaze love bookshop.org because you can go there, you can find your favorite independent bookstore or one closest to you. Order your books from them, please. Or you can just walk to your favorite store. If you have a question, please post it in the chat. We're going to be taking questions probably in a half hour. And I just can't wait to talk to her. So let me introduce Ellie, and then we'll start a conversation. So Elinor LIpman's first book was Into Love and Out Again. It had 7 linked stories, which she said gave her the courage to try a novel. Then She Found Me was published in 1990. And it's not only a wonderful book, it was this fabulous movie with Helen Hunt, Bette Midler, Colin Firth, Matthew Broderick. In 2001, she received the New England Book Award for Fiction for her body of work. In 2007, she got a Lifetime Achievement Award from the New England Library and Information Network, created to recognize the contributions of an individual associated with New England who has significantly advanced the arts and letters. My latest grievance, when the Poetry Center's 2007 Patterson Fiction Prize, awarded annually for a novel which the judges deemed to be the strongest work of fiction ever. So the raves are already coming in for this book. First of all, we have Richard Russo says, Miss Demeanor is a complete and utter delight. Of course it is. What Elinor LIpman novel isn't? Tom Parada says, who knew house arrest could be sexy and fun? Not me, at least not until I read Miss Demeanor. And the New York Times, in a brilliant review a day or so ago, called it a celebration of guiltless pleasure, and it is all that. So welcome, Ellie. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Fun. Yeah.
So, in Miss Demeanor, we have the character of Jane, who's amazing because, first of all, she's middle-aged. She's not a sweet young thing. She's smart, and she's a lawyer, and she's seen having al fresco sex, and a nosy neighbor reports her, and the judge sentences her to 6 months of home confinement. So she's jobless. She's trapped in her apartment, and someone tells her that there's another white-collar felon serving the same home confinement, Perry. So as I said in my rave blurb for this, what happens next is like a 5-course, 5-star meal. Totally delicious and totally delectable. So my first question is, how common is house arrest? Is it because it's easier and cheaper than prison? And how would you yourself fare under house arrest, Ellie?
Well, there was the quarantine, there was the pandemic, so I didn't set out to make this a metaphor, but I was conscious of the fact, you had to order in and you couldn't go anywhere, so that kind of helped. But and actually, my characters use house arrest facetiously. The legal term is home confinement because when I was writing this book, right from the get-go, I knew I had to make it right legally. So I consulted a criminal lawyer, and even Jimmy Mulligan that I went to high school with, who's a policeman and then a superintendent, and he was in the FBI. He gets like a whole paragraph in my acknowledgments, and two other lawyers and an immigration lawyer and a judge. So, but I didn't ask the question, how common is home confinement? I didn't. I
Well,
didn't ask.
do you think having gone through the pandemic that you could go through home confinement?
Well, there would be that shame and guilt that you didn't have so much with quarantine and pandemic. And the judge makes an example of her because she's a lawyer and she's supposed to be
Right,
upholding
right.
the laws of New York State and the Constitution. So I worried about that too, and I asked, like, would this be too extreme for having sex on the roof? And the lawyer said, get the wrong judge, or in this case, the right judge.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
That's right.
making an example of her, and somebody actually fed me the line that said, when she objected and said, essentially, people al fresco sex is probably happening all over the city
That's
between
right.
consulting adults, and the judge would say, yeah, but the woman across the street who saw you, her grandchildren could have been visiting. I know, what a prude. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like in one of our apartments where Jeff and I lived, across the street from us, we had one window, one picture window. Across the street from us was this guy who would pull the blinds over his head and stand naked and do all sorts of things to his body. And I called the police and said the same thing, that, like, what if we have kids over here? And the New York City police said, lady, don't look, lower your blinds.
Oh, that's
So
great.
that was
That's great.
So anyway, I want to talk about Jane because she's such a great, great character. She she never struggles with guilt. She never struggles with her desires. She owns them. This, as somebody else, a TV writer, commented on, this is extraordinary and wonderful. Did you know that this was who Jane was going to be, or did she just sort of happen on the page?
No, my characters just happen. I usually start with just, I'm lucky if it's, just a good first sentence. And then every minute I'm thinking, what next? What next? Oh, and by the way, the New York Times review, which I'm thrilled about, called her middle age. She's 39.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
What's that about? Yeah. I don't know how old the reviewer is.
I was going to say, the reviewer is probably 20 years old. 39 is not middle-aged, folks.
Yes, but
Okay.
anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yes. So it's do you outline? Because I don't. Do you outline?
Oh, I do, but then I tear it up. I mean, I outline for anxiety, just so I know the beginning, the middle, the end, and then it all changes. So yes and no.
Yeah. Jane developed, and also I'm always thinking about, the puzzle pieces, and and these have to fit together. And I want it to be a satisfying ending. And I guess sometimes people might think that I specialize in happy endings. I'm not ashamed of that. And so with Jane, it was almost as if a lot of my energy went into, this has to be a story. She's in one location and she can't leave. So what can happen to somebody who's confined to a space? And so there's, people across the street who factor in, especially the woman. We haven't heard the end of the woman who calls the police on her.
Right. I also want to say something about, you're talking about happy endings. Your kind of happy endings are always earned. Your people go through.
Right.
It's true, though. It's true that the people go through, real conflicts with real things at stake. And there's always, at least a soupçon of unhappiness. It's not like there's a big difference between, a book that's, like an ice cream sundae. It's like froth and it's not very nutritious. You eat it, you love it, and then you move on. Your books are about serious things. They do have happy endings, but they're absolutely 100% earned. It's a real life happy ending, and we're glad for it.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. But it's true. It's true. It's true. So before we talk about Miss Demeanor's origin story, I want to talk about yours because it's great. I mean, just you're saying you found the courage to begin a novel. And part of the story also involves another wonderful, wonderful writer whom we just lost, Mimi Bedwood, who died recently. Um, so tell us that story. It's a great, great story.
Well, it's like a lot of other writers' stories. I was working in a real journalism job. I actually worked for the Mass Teachers Association,
Uh
Teachers
huh.
Union, and I did the newsletter and the magazine. And I started to sort of look around the office and think that could be an interesting story, fiction. And so, no, and this was, I was about 28 at the time. So I signed up for a course at Brandeis Adult Ed. And it was, and the reason I had the courage to do it, it said we'd start with exercises. So I thought, okay, I can do exercises. And so I signed up and it was $40 for 10 weeks. And when the first night came, I was nervous, and I thought, would I be able to find a parking space? I'd had to drive from Newton to Waltham, and you're from Waltham, yeah,
Right, right. I'm a Waltham girl.
yeah, Brandeis, but I had to go because I'd spent $40 for this course. So I went, and at the end of the first class, people were talking. People had come with finished stories, and some people were working on novels. So I thought, and people were discussing things, and somebody used the word contrapuntal, and I thought, well, I'm really over my head here. So I went up to the teacher, and his name was Arthur Edelstein, and I said, thank you very much. This was very enjoyable, but I don't, it's too advanced. I think it's not right for me. And
Wow.
and he said, it was one of those moments. He said, "Oh, come on, it'll be fun." So I see that as one of those, moments. Two roads diverged. So he kept assigning exercises, and I was the last one. Other people were bringing stories in, and after 5 or 6 weeks, does anyone else still need an exercise? And I was the only one that raised my hand, and he said he wanted me to bring a fiction. That's how he put it. He wanted me
Okay.
to bring a fiction. So let me turn some more light on here. Is it better? Um,
You look beautiful.
and so I went home and I struggled, and I wrote half of his story, 4 pages, and I brought it in. And the next week he said, so far so good, finish it. And then the next week he read it to the class, which wasn't, no, he read everything to the class. That was
Oh, he did. Oh, okay.
so everything, good or bad, he read it. So he read it to the class, and people laughed in a good way. And I was entranced. It was, it was like the roar of the grease paint, the smell of the crowd. It was, and I still have this image. I was like looking around, and the whole thing turned into like black and white, and people were frozen with heads, their heads thrown back laughing. And I went home that night, and this is on the basis of like a crappy story that never saw the light of day. But, people laughed, and I went home, and my late husband, yelled downstairs, how was it? And I very dramatically like slid down to the floor, my back against the door, and said, "This is what I want to do for the rest of my life." And which, if anyone who writes who's ever been in a workshop knows that the good reception of a story does not mean that this is what you're going to do. But I kept writing stories, and then one became a short story collection. And my editor was Stacy Schiff at Viking, the famous
Wow.
Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer, whose wonderful book is out now, The Revolutionary, Samuel Adams.
Pick it up, everybody. That's an incredible story. There was another wonderful story where you said, I just want to emphasize again what a wonderful writer Mimi Bedwood was. And I think you told me you both sent stories away and there was a mix up in the mail. I'll let
Oh
you.
God. Oh God. Yeah, that one. Oh, yeah, we had a combined short story collection, Yeah, well, both of us, I read in the newspaper one day that, there were these it was sort of the moment of the short story collection. So I called up Maeve.
Right.
We met at this Brandeis class, not in the first 10 weeks, but in the second iteration. She joined.
Wow.
So, um, so anyway, I called her one day and I said, you know what? If we put our stories together, we have enough stories for a collection. So we did that. We got an agent, and the agent sent stories out. And she called me one day, the agent, and said she would like to separate the stories and mine, send out mine. And, yeah, and that was bad enough. She said, don't worry, she would write to both of us. This was before email. So she wrote 2 letters and switched the envelope. So my positive letter, I'd like to do this and I'd like to do that, went to Maeve. And so I don't even, now I've said it so much in public, but, well, of course, she then went on to write 5
Yeah, she went on to great acclaim. So all's well that ends well.
Nonetheless, I say that it's such a tribute to her character and her friendship. I don't know how many other fellow novelists or writers would have survived. That friendship would have survived. And she's, and just we read each other's every word that we wrote, including, blurbs and essays and everything. And I was the one that pushed her to turn one of her short stories into a novel, which was the novel Whale. Yeah.
Oh, I
yeah.
loved Mail. I loved Mail. And that's just the most delightful, wonderful novel. That should be a film.
It is.
But that's just like such a wonderful origin story. So now let's talk about the origin story of Miss Demeanor. What was on your mind when you started writing this? Was it, being in lockdown, or did the character Jane just start talking to you? How did that develop?
Well, okay. My previous book, Rachel to the Rescue.
Right.
I couldn't help it. I couldn't help writing that. It was about my character worked at the Trump White House in an office that later became famous because they taped together everything that Trump ripped up. And I wrote about that in Politico, and I wrote about that. And I never had a book turned down. And my editor and other editors said, it was, they were worried about Trump fatigue by the time the book would get published. So while all of this not great stuff is happening, although it got published first right away in England,
Yeah.
it got published happily by Houghton Mifflin, which is my publisher now, HarperCollins, because they bought Houghton Mifflin, and my editor survived the transition, and thank goodness. My agent was saying, as we were going through this with Rachel, like, why don't you start something new? So I did, and so it was a little bit under duress, pressure, depression, and I had this idea that I only recently found on my phone in notes, and it was that maybe my character would be a recipe tester. Really, I mean, for book, but I thought that was a little funny, but it did become her sister. The identical twin sister is a successful dermatologist who's always trying to help Jane, and she's always like the alpha twin, and throughout the 6 months, Jane is always feeling like a beta twin. So it had a food beginning. And the sex on the roof was chapter 2. And when I took a good hard look at it, I said, okay, that food stuff's going to be kind of secondary until later on in the book. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. And I wanted to read something else. This was from a famed TV writer. And he talks about that he naively thought that writing was always about the words. And it is, of course, ultimately. But before you can get to that, there's the way harder part, concocting and structuring and piecing together the story. He just finished reading your multi layered tale, and his first thought was that he didn't think that you've ever integrated so many moving parts. And even though it was the most limited in story world scope because she's locked in her apartment, it had an intricate number of places to keep spinning. There were twins, multiple lovers, multiple set of parents, the poles, the desperate desperate.
How many lovers are multiple? How many multiples is that?
Well, probably like two. Probably like two. But that's all right. That's all right. He says you make it feel easy, Ellie, but of course I know it's not. So let's talk about those spinning plates because that's really interesting because it is. It's like there's so much going on and yet it's all in perfect balance. How? How did you do that? Was it not in perfect balance and then you just sort of nipped and tucked until it was, or?
I think I'm a very strict and fierce editor of my own work. So in thinking what next, she was limited. She did have the run of the building, not a very big. Oh, by the way, if this is exactly my apartment building on the corner of 57th and 7th. So I gave it a different name, but I didn't go to any trouble to to disguise it. Why? So I was limited. So I had to make things happen. So, and also this happens to me fairly frequently. She goes back up to the terrace she's reading and whatever she's doing up there. And she looks across the way to where the prude of a mother superior, not literally, had called the police on her. And it looks a little funny. It looks a little overgrown
Right.
with a lot of plants. So stuff like that happens. And then I think, okay, what happened to that woman? Did something happen to her?
Right.
And then I have to figure things out. I can't really explain, the plates in the air. There is a point where because even though I don't outline, about 2/3 of the way through the book, I make a list of like balls that I've thrown up into the air that I have to bring down. So I make a list of those, and I have to. I'm not good at explaining this because it's not exactly trial and error. I'll start a new chapter. And I pretty much know if it's working, if I've opened up a new sort of plot path that's worth following, but always knowing that I have to sort of bring it back. I mean, or that it has to be all tied up kind of neatly.
Okay. Do you feel that one novel of yours builds on another? Like, do you feel that when you start a new novel, like, oh, I learned those lessons from this past one and I can use this on this one? Or is each novel a totally new thing?
It's totally a new thing. I probably, one thing I've learned from all of them is that it's the writing. You have to have you have to have faith in your own process. And my process is I don't know what's next, but I know I'm going to work it out. I'm going to figure it out. So that was, I think it was Tim O'Brien who said that have faith in the process. And that has helped me. It's rather simple. It's nothing you'd have embroidered on a pillowcase, but just, I'm going to figure it out. Just the way I'm working up these 15 pages I have now, I'm thinking, like, am I going to be able to pull this off? Well, I've pulled it off before.
Okay, so
this is not going to go into a book on how to write a novel.
No. Miss Demeanor is a page turner. Do you know it's going to be a page turner? Do you have a sense of that when you're writing it? No, really?
No. I can give you an example. Of how I don't know that.
Wow.
I finished this book on a train up to visit Mamie, and it turned out to be 12 days before she died. It was my last visit. So I sent it off to my editor. Mind you, it's a week before Christmas. And so I started, even though it was Christmas coming up and New Year's and publishing closes, as the weeks went by and I didn't hear back, I started worrying more and more. And I had scenarios like, she's leaving, she's interviewing for a new job. She doesn't know how to tell me. So she's consulting with my agent about how they're or hey, on and on and on. And there was never like this continuum of he loves it so much, she doesn't know what to say. It was all like bad stuff. And one Saturday morning in January, I opened my email and it was like, I love this so much. And she said it was brilliant and hilarious. And the oh, so so I do not think it's a page turner until somebody tells me that it's a page turner. And those words from the New York Times, that was a good place to call it a page turner.
That's spoken like a true writer. Well, it is a page turner. Let me show the gorgeous cover again. It's really a great book. Great, great book. All right, so I want to talk about Jane has her own cooking channel, which to me is like quintessential Ellie Lippman.
Though, because
TikTok, it's still a channel though. It's still a channel, and TikTok is a very big deal. So I want to talk about your relationship to food, any recipes of hers that you use, and what's cooking for dinner tonight at your home.
Oh, first I'll talk about the recipe in the book. Without making it too much of a reveal, there is a point where one of her TikTok things, she makes, she feels that her brand is kind of like, bad food, that she's hoping to get, her sister made her do it, and she feels like she doesn't take it that seriously. So she chooses recipes from this really old, real cookbook that I could quote from directly, because one of the other lawyers I consulted is intellectual property. And he said, that this book was published in 1896. You can copy from but I give it credit and the acknowledgments. So she makes things like boiled onions in white sauce, things like that. But one day she does a recipe that is actually called Aunt Jane's bread pudding, which is called that in the book. And then this becomes very autobiographical, because when I made that pudding once for an event, what happened in the book actually happened in real life, about somebody liked it so much who'd never tasted it and ate half of it. And there's a little bit of more, the plot develops from there. So, okay. Did you ask what I'm making tonight?
What's for dinner tonight?
This, I have to sort of preface it by saying company's coming. So there's many more pieces. So I make bread. I make all our bread. Ours, like my significant other, Jonathan, who was like exceedingly helpful with this, anything that had to do with art in this book. Okay. So we're starting with smoked salmon tartare that I've just and then we're having chicken with preserved lemons and olives, and couscous made with chickpeas and cinnamon, and what else? Some green beans with dill, and I made a rice pudding for dessert.
Oh my God, that's incredible. I remember having dinner at your house when Max was little, and it was sort of like every plate was used for these delicious, delicious things. It was amazing. It was amazing.
But I took too much time with my courses. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No. The courses are amazing. Do you have don't you think that, like, what's the metaphor for cooking for you? Is it nurturing others, or is it nurturing yourself, or
it's definitely, making other people happy, and part of it's a little bit of showing off, I think.
Do you see this
people who are coming tonight? I really don't like I say my parents aren't going to be impressed and I make bread. So a little bit showing off because when I'm cooking for myself, it's like I broil chicken wings and bake a potato. So
Yeah.
I think there's an answer to that. But I do love it. And I love that, it takes me 18 months, 15 months to write a book, yet I can make a meal and it's done by, dinner time.
Wow, it takes you 18 months to write a book. How many hours a day is that?
Oh, it's not so many hours. I aim for 500 words a day. And if I reach 500 words too early, too soon, too easily, then I do more.
Okay. Okay, that's good. There's always like this thing where people feel they have to write a certain amount of pages or words a day. And of course, I always feel like, well, my thing is like 4 pages or 4 hours. Either way.
Oh, good.
Excuse me. Um, so this seems like a very smart New York comedy. Let's talk about Story World. You lived in Northampton for a long time. You've lived in Boston, and now you're in Manhattan. Did all those different places change you and to change your writing or change you in any other way than in your writing?
Um, well, definitely the setting of novels. I didn't set a novel in New York until I wrote The Family Man, which I can't even remember what year that was. That was the first one, and that was when I actually had an apartment in New York. But then I go back, and my my sister thinks that whatever, like the Way Men Act, which was my second novel, was set in a fictional town I called Harrow, and it was really Northampton, like to the letter, and where I
Right.
lived. And my sister, who's very smart, said, "You know that Harrow has the same number of letters as Lowell, which is where we grew up."
Oh my God. That's right.
And then in Miss Demeanor, it's her parents live in Harrow, and her father teaches at Macmillan College, or he's emeritus, which is where the Wayman Act. It's a college town. So I've done a few things like that where I pick up little snippets. From the justice of the peace who married in then she found me married April and Dwight who was his last name was Baskin, and I made it the same name as married Tim and Hannah in my short story collection.
So, of all your books, do you have a favorite heroine?
Oh,
I
favorite.
know they're all your children, but is there one who resonates
Well,
with you the
a
most?
smart author would say the new book,
Okay.
Jane Morgan, for sure. No,
Okay.
I'm very fond of her, and, I was able to make her she's a little depressed, and she could be cranky and resentful, and, but, I had to give her a happy ending.
Okay. We
Also
have
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm
I
sorry.
was going to say, when people ask me about favorite books, I always say, The In It Like Divine is really an important book to me. My family really got turned away from a restricted hotel in um, Vermont. And, but that book, it has so many readers. I feel like that takes care of itself. Like, I don't have to call that a
Right.
favorite special book because other people, adopted it in such a way that it did fine on its own.
Okay. We have 5 audience questions for you. I want to tell everybody out there, and thank you all so much for commenting on this. The first audience question is let me put it up. Do you believe in 3 act structure?
Well, I do when I'm watching movies, I like my 3 act structure, but no, I don't follow anything like that. No. To me, that comes, a little bit too much from a book on how to write.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. I feel the same way. I feel like it's Really? I think stories are more built on reveals and revelations than like, okay, here we are. I always think of the theater in 3-act structure, which you actually could think of as 2-act structure since they always have that intermission in the middle of the play. Okay, so let's see. We have another one. Let's see. What makes a great premise for you and why? What makes it original?
Oh,
Hmm.
I actually have an answer to that. When I start a book, and sometimes it's just the opening line,
Like
and
what? Can you give us some great opening lines? I
um,
think let's see what the one is for Miss Demeanor.
like Divine has a pretty damn good opening line. If I can find a copy of it, hold on.
Oh wait, Miss Demeanor has a great first line. Let's say there were two people, a man and do you want to? Would you like to read it? Do you
Oh,
have the
okay.
book in it? Otherwise, I will. It's better if you read it. That's a
And then
great opening.
okay. Let's say there were two people, a man and a woman, lounging on the rooftop terrace of an apartment building in Midtown Manhattan. And then I'll skip to the next opening. We'll call him Noah, and we'll call her me.
That
Let me reach for, excuse me here, the In It Like Divine. This is probably one of my favorite, the opening line of the In It Like Divine. And then I'll remember what the rest of the second question is. Okay. It was not complicated, and as my mother pointed out, not even personal. They had a hotel. They didn't want Jews. We were Jews. So that's the In It Like Divine.
that's
And
great. Yeah.
For me, what makes it's so a great premise, I discover the premise. I have this opening line, and then it's like, what's it about? What's it about? What's going to make it work? What's going to keep the audience interested and turning the pages and identify with the characters and and this is sort of not really the answer to the question, but
That's okay.
I did an event. This was ages ago, and it was in Fort Worth, Texas. And someone asked the wonderful writer, now the late Robert Stone, what is the purpose of a novel? And other people gave longer, more pretentious answers. And he said he felt that the purpose of a novel was to make the reader feel less lonely. And, I think I feel as if, this could be you. But what makes it original, who was it? Was it John Gardner who said that that novels are about three things, and the three different things, and that one is if someone new comes to town,
Right.
a stranger comes to town, someone leaves home, and I forget the third one. Do you remember the third one?
No, I don't.
Maybe
I remember the street, but there are
maybe
three plus.
yeah, a stranger comes to town, or someone leaves home. So what makes it original?
It's
You can't
you.
read every book. I mean, you can't read every book to know what makes it original. And do I want to go out of my way to write some crazy original?
But your books are original.
you know,
I mean, what makes your book so original is they're all filtered through Elinor LIpman, which is like something miraculous. We have another question. Let me get that up. Can you talk about what you're working on now?
I can say, well, yes, I can, because this is I went on Facebook, and what's it called when you invite people to like help crowdsourced?
Crowdsourced.
I crowdsourced that my character owns and operates, and she does estate sales. So I went on Facebook and I asked if if people could recommend or come up with a good name for an fictional estate sale business. And people wrote, like hundreds of people answered, and a lot of them thought everybody, estate sale meant that everybody was dead. So there were, a lot of things about, like dead people's belongings. But so somebody came up with Finders Keepers, and that's the name of my character's business. But so that's what I'm working on. Oh, and my character, her parents were teachers who just did this on weekends, and now they're moved away to Buzzards Bay, Massachusetts, and she's doing it on her own.
Okay. And we have another audience question, and then I have two more questions for you from myself.
Okay, I'll be quick.
Can you talk about what you're working on now?
I did that.
Can you tell us what you're working on now or anything about it?
Oh, I just did, about the estate sales.
Oh, right. That's right. I'm sorry. I'm so busy like looking at the questions. Okay, so what's obsessing you now and why?
Oh, I like that. Oh, what's obsessing me now? Well, I get up at 5:30 in the morning and start with Way Too Early with Jonathan Lemire, because the Lemire families lived behind us in Lowell, Massachusetts. And Jonathan is the son of Robert Lemire, who lived behind me. Okay, so I watch that. I watch Morning Joe. So politics for sure.
For sure, yeah.
And, the January 6th committee, I watched it. And I guess, my new book just came out on December 27th. So I would say major obsession, and that's it. And I have two grandbabies.
Oh yeah, love those babies.
Well, almost 4 and 2. And Caroline is one of a great appreciator of babies.
I love babies. Last question. What question didn't I ask you that I should have asked you, or that you would like to answer?
Oh, I can't think. Somebody said we miss your daily political
poetry.
Yes. Thank you, Pamela, for saying that. I can't think of anything.
Okay. Any last words that you'd like to say to the audience out there?
Not really. This is an interesting thing. My new publisher, HarperCollins, Harper Perennial, suggested that for the first time the book comes out in paperback. So it's brought out in paperback. And at first my agent and I said, we'll think about it. And then I said, as long as in any way it's not a demotion. And they said, oh no, don't worry. And I love that people can buy it in paperback right away, and that it's, not such a big ask to have somebody buy a paperback. So, very happy about that.
I want to tell you, in relationship to that, when I first moved to Algonquin for my first book, Pictures of You, they said, we're going to do it in a paperback original. And I thought, I had the same feeling, like, oh my God, really? Not a hardback? And you know what? It was so successful because people take a chance on it. And it was actually my first New York Times bestseller. And I wanted them to do the second one as a paperback original. And it also did really well and became a New York Times bestseller. I wanted them to do the third one that way. And they said, no, we're going to do it hardback. And it was not as successful. So, it did okay. But I think this is really the way of the future because books are expensive. And it's so easy to pack something that's this size into your purse and to carry it.
And we all, when you go into a bookstore,
they're on the table.
Yeah, new in paperback is a really good place to go. Yeah. So anyway, but it's a new world, and I'm doing I'm doing a tour a lot in Massachusetts. But I'm going to Milwaukee because there's been just faithful books.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Amy and I and Anita Shreve went to Milwaukee and cut the ribbon when this store opened. And so I'm going there on, I think it's January 16th or so, whatever the Tuesday is. It might be the 17th, but I'm going to Milwaukee.
That is wonderful. Well, I want to remind everybody again Miss Demeanor, paperback original. That means you can buy it for friends, which you should if you're a friend.
Yes.
Bookshop.org or your favorite indie. I want to thank everybody who is here. This is actually recorded, so it's going to be on YouTube forever. It lives forever. So you can go look at it again and again or tell your friends and have them comment. And I want to especially thank Ellie. This was so much fun. Thank you so much, Ellie. And I'll talk to you all later. So see you all next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.